Martin Luther King was one of the speakers who addressed the crowd during the March on Washington. And many of you are familiar with the I Have a Dream call and response technique that was used at the end of the speech in order to create that crescendo that caused the crowd to clap at the end. You're familiar with it? It's that section that was printed in the program. However, the most powerful section of that historical speech tends to get overlooked. And it gets overlooked because of the harsh reality that many revisionist historians still want to act like there was a certain reality that wasn't happening. Is it okay if I share this quote with you?
Amen.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulation. Some of you have come fresh out of jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest, the quest for freedom, left you battered by the storm of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been veterans of creative suffering and continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. And there was change. It wasn't good enough or fast enough, but there was movement. As the emphasis shifted from the Mid-Atlantic region back to the Deep South, Martin Luther King continued to speak passionately about the issues that mattered. After multiple attempts to register new voters in Selma were stifled, Martin Luther King and leaders of the movement organized the march from Selma to Montgomery. The trek was arduous, and the participants were tired and weary when the march reached its conclusion. But he still used the spoken word to communicate to them so that they could relish in all the things that they had already accomplished while painting a picture of things they still desired. The last quote reads, "Strangely, the climactic conflicts always were fought and won on Alabama soil." After the bus boycott in Montgomery, heroic confrontations loomed in Mississippi and Arkansas and Georgia and elsewhere. But not until the colossus of segregation challenged in Birmingham did the conscience of America begin to bleed. White America was profoundly aroused by Birmingham because it witnessed the whole community of Negroes facing terror and brutality, majestic scorn and heroic courage. And from the wells of democratic spirit, the nation finally forced Congress to write in hope that it would eradicate the stain of Birmingham. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 gave Negroes some part of their rightful dignity, but without the vote, it was dignity without strength.
All right.
In October of 1964, Martin Luther King became the youngest person to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize. He was 35 years old when he received the award, and this accolade created additional exposure inside of media circles. Martin Luther King and leaders of the civil rights movement used the additional media exposure to bring more visibility to the community's plight. In his oral communications, Martin Luther King used vivid imagery to paint a picture that the media could use as it crafted its message and transmitted its message to the masses. This final quote paints the picture perfectly. Once more, the method of nonviolent resistance was unsheathed from its scabbard, and once again, an entire community was mobilized to confront the adversity. And again, the brutality of a dying order shrieks across the land. Yet, Selma, Alabama became a shining moment in the conscience of man. If the worst of American life lurked in the dark streets, the best of American instincts rose passionately from across the nation to overcome it. There was never a moment in the history of America that was more honorable and more inspiring than the pilgrimage of clergymen and laymen of every race and faith pouring into Selma to face danger at the side of its embattled Negroes. During today's speech, I discussed the importance of re-educating ourselves from time to time. We have to remind ourselves of the ugly history of Jim Crow and segregation, while at the same time reflecting on the progress that we have made thanks to the life and legacy of leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To this end, I shared with you a summary of Dr. King's biography and a few key events that shaped the early days of the civil rights movement. The March on Washington, the March from Selma to Montgomery, the Montgomery bus boycott, the Birmingham campaign, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In addition, I articulated the lessons learned from key events in the civil rights struggle while simultaneously focusing on the skills required to lead social movements in the future. The most significant being the ability to anchor the movement in simple concepts, the ability to navigate the movement from point A to point B to point C while avoiding the obstacles that will inevitably be thrown in your path. And finally, the ability to communicate. As we lead today's celebration and return to our daily routines, I am issuing a call to action to everybody within the sound of my voice. First, apply these lessons learned from reviewing the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., not only in January, and not only during Black History Month, but each and every day.
All right.
The second, to emphasize what the mayor said, let's work together inside of our community to create our own opportunities and leave a legacy that future citizens of Pritchard can be happy about.
Right.
Third, let's build bridges, connect, and develop with groups outside of our core community to facilitate understanding. And finally, let's celebrate by demonstrating excellence in everything we do. Thank you guys so much for letting me talk.